What separates the good dads from the average dads? What's the difference between an average dad and a great dad? Is it a fluke, or do they know something that you don't know, or have they developed certain habits, certain secrets that help them to excel above the rest? Find out on today's episode. Men in the Arena Army, we salute you. Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the Men in the Arena podcast. I'm Jim Ramos, your host and guide to your best version in the stress bubble of life and beyond. Guys, thanks again, men, for making this Spotify's #1 podcast for Christian men. I'm excited today to have our guest on the show, Dr. Ken Canfield. So he's married. If you know, he's also married to Michelle Watson Canfield, aka the Dad Whisperer. We've had her on the show a couple times. Dr. Ken Canfield is a nationally known leader, scholar, and a founder of National Center for Fathering. Ken has testified to the National Commission of Children, served as founding member of the Father to Father Initiative and the National Fatherhood Leaders Group. He's been recognized for his leadership and was rewarded the Father of the Year by the National Congress for Men and Children. He's authored 12 books, including The Heart of a Father, They Call Me Dad, and The 7 Secrets of Effective Fathers, which is our subject of today's discussion. Ken, it's great to have you on the show.
Jim, I'm all in. Men in the Arena. Listen up, because we're going after your fathering heritage and your fathering presence, if you're there right now.
Well, I'm really excited to get into this. Why don't we start with this? Why don't you tell your story a little bit about what makes you tick, and just so our guys can get to know you a little better.
Yeah, well, the real deal is in 1980, my oldest child was born. Something happened in me. You know, when I was born, my dad dropped my mom off at the hospital and, of course, separated from my mom. He goes smoking cigars in a hospital. Can you get this picture? Now, that was then. Then we had things separate. We didn't have that attachment. And my dad, I don't think, really changed a diaper or anything. He didn't know what to do until I could throw a football or a baseball or do something like that. So when my daughter was born, Jim, it was powerful. I was a part of the birth process and all 5 children. So guys, I'm in the arena just like you. We are fathers in the arena today. And so I've gone through the adolescent years, sending kids off. All of them are married. And then, Jim, what happens? Your kids meet other kids. They have more kids. Now I'm a grandfather of 15.
Whoa. Wow. So no wonder you founded the National Center of Fathering. Holy cow. So you founded this in 1990, right?
I did, yes.
So talk to us about why you saw the need and tell us about the mission of your organization.
Got it. Okay, first, this is the deal. Back then, the mothering literature was 7 times deeper than the fathering literature. Fathers were looked at as unnecessary additions to the family. In fact, noted anthropologist says fathers are a biological necessity and a sociological accident. Can you believe that? They didn't know what to do. And you see what the feds did, unfortunately. They undercut marginalized minority men. What? They rewarded women having children with extra support and so forth, notwithstanding the need was there, but it sent a message, you're not needed. Hey, go father another child over there and there will be more money coming in. So we have this, what I call fractured culture that misses the role of a father. Now, in the 80s, they started to realize, hey, dads do have a role. The 90s, you see fathers starting to step up. And then what I saw, Jim, was fathering being the best of times and the worst of times. We had dads doing things like you, I, and just trying to do our best that were never done in past generations. And we had fatherlessness at its worst. I'm telling you, abuse, abdication, absence, all that stuff. So in the midst of this, Jim, I thought, I got to bring some research to the forefront. So I began in a PhD program looking at the unique things that fathers did that mothers didn't and why we needed them.
That's so good. Well, your work has been monumental. Your writings have been amazing. I've really appreciated what they've meant to me as a father. And I want to dive into this book, The 7 Secrets of Effective Fathers. Now, I love this because it's like, hey guys, listen, it implies that not everybody knows this stuff. This is not assumed. This is something that men have to dive into. Why did you write this book and title it the way you title it?
Okay. Now, I gave myself over to my publisher to title it. What I would title it is The 7 Traits of Effective Fathers. So this is what I did. I looked at 10,000 fathers and I analyzed them, and then I got a select group of particularly effective fathers. Now, these fathers weren't just fathers of 2 and 3-year-olds, Jim. These were fathers that had gone through the life course. Feeding a toddler peanut butter and smiling is different than a teenager that's dealing with all these issues. So I looked at these fathers who were also nominated by other leaders in their community as particularly effective fathers, but I didn't stop there. I sent an extensive survey to their adult children and to the mothers that partnered with these fathers. And then out of the data, these 7 traits emerged. Now, my publisher said, we got some sexy here. Let's call them secrets. But it's really common sense and truth. But you have to drill down to get the gusto, the muscle of what these fathers did that was distinct. And that's where the 7 secrets come from. And as you noted, Jim, there's a profile in the book where you can take and assess yourself, how you're doing compared to these 7 traits. And I got something just for men in the arena. Okay, listen up. You can go to fathers.com. You go to the top of the page, you click, and I've got the 7 secrets profile you can take for free. And if you're a bold dude, get this. You can send a copy of it to your wife and have her take it on you. And if your child, you don't want to send it to a young kid, but if they're mature, you can either get feedback from them. Because what we need to do, men in the arena, is rear a generation of stellar fathers. And that's where I'm at.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And these guys are hungry to be the best version in Christ of the dads they're called to be. So in your book, we're still in single digits of your book. You start talking about some truths about fathering. What are some truths that you want to tell these guys? Hey guys, these are some truths that you need to know about fathering.
Okay, the basics anybody knows. Acorns don't far fall from the tree. You're a chip off the old block. So a predecessor to these secrets and traits is really this. How is your relationship with your father or lack of a dad influenced your fathering? I used to tell guys regularly, you can't be the father you really want to be until you're first the son. And you got to reconcile maybe the accumulation of generational dung. That's right. That has come into your family system. You deal with that and you are going to come alive. First of all, because you're a generational change agent and your children are going to benefit. So sifting through, how do you think your father influenced you? What do you wish you would have done more with your father? What are those voids and how did you fill them? Because as men, we need the blessing of a father, whether it's a heavenly one or an earthly one. And you get into the surrogate fathers, maybe a grandfather filled in, maybe an older brother or uncle. But we as men have a void, a father void in our psychic and in our soul. And we need that filled if we're going to excel in these traits that we're going to outline.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We need to look back to our fathers. So what about this? I'm listening to the podcast. I'm saying, hey, this must be becoming an effective father. God made us to be good fathers. This must be by default. So effective fathering must be easy. What would you speak to that?
No, it's a skill. Okay, there's an art in it. There is a genetic heritage that you receive from your father, no doubt about it. And when I talk about dealing with those issues, I'm talking about issues related to behavior, issues related to his example, issues related to his problems. And what you are doing is kind of clearing the deck. And that is where, and Jim, I've done this for 30 plus years. I know of no other way to clean the deck than get the healing, cleansing love of another father. Guys, all fathers make mistakes. Fathers fail. But the mark of the father is that what you do after you fail. And if you've got a heavenly father saying, I got you, man, I'm with you. In fact, I know your children better than you, and I have given you the privilege to steward them, then that opens you up to spiritual insights that are prophetic, that are powerful, that can guide you. Now, all the skills are important, but the most important thing is that open heart. And when that is there, these secrets become alive, because in many ways, they're what should be done, and by design can be done through you as the father of your children. Whether you're divorced, whether you're a custodial dad, whether you're in a difficult situation right now, God has really empowered you to be that guy. That's where the hope is.
It's really interesting, Ken. I was actually a guest on a podcast this morning. This guy's a great ministry. He's a 32-year-old man, and he asked me the question about fear, and that his generation of men has a real fear of messing up. And I basically answered exactly what you just said. Like, we can't focus on the fear. That'll paralyze us. That'll hinder us. That'll produce children that are not equipped. But we need to focus on our Father in heaven, and that he has called us to steward these children into their best version in Christ. So you really affirmed some things I was saying earlier today. What about training? Where does training come into fatherhood as one of the truths that we're talking about to these dads?
Well, as men, we know if we're in a war and we're in a spiritual war, we need to be trained, we need to know the equipment, and we need to know the enemy, because the enemy is a father too, Jim. He's a father of lies. He is a father of fear. He is a father to second guess you and to bring shame and guilt that may be generationally packed into your system. So in this training, you've got to do a couple of things. First, a man without a small group is an accident waiting to happen. You guys listening to Men in the Arena is the first step. But you know what you need to do? Do Men in the Arena in your community and church. And listen to the podcast together, or listen separately and get together and hammer out through vulnerability and transparency. Yeah, I'm saying it's time to pull back the curtain. And that takes bravery to do. But I'm going to tell you this, you're not alone. Every father that is honest knows he has issues that need to be reconciled and exposed in a healthy way so healing can come. And so this training that you mentioned can be done in a number of ways. Certainly, you can read a book. You can listen to this podcast. You can get with other men, but you got to get out in the life of your child with other dads. One of the best things that I was able to be a part of is getting a watchdogs program going in local schools. And this came from the school shootings years ago in the 90s in Arkansas. So dad said, we got to do something. Things are out of control. So these watchdogs, dads of great students, showed up, and they were an unobtrusive security presence. And this is what happened. When dads showed up, they were the example to the kids in the elementary school. And it was awesome. The teachers and the administrators noted, hey, this is good. Can you come more often? And these heroes in the hallway started to show up in numbers. And there's a little over 5,000 schools that have kind of fathering friendly programs. Dads, that's a place to get training too. Your church community. Now, this is an area that really needs attention. We need in every faith community a group of guys saying, hey, fathering is one of the things God put me on the planet for and keeps me alive. Well, if you get together, you need to be not just open, but aspiring to apply things that you know are important. For instance, if your dad has never told you he loved you, which Jim, you and I know is a majority of men, how are you going to learn that unless you're with other men who have experienced that or who are like you, explorers and learning to say that? And I just believe that skill training is so critical, and what you're doing is vital to the nurturing of this fathering movement.
That's so good, man. I sure appreciate that. Well, guys, what sparked me here, Ken, was I just released a book called Help. I'm starting a men's group. So guys, that is a free resource on our website. You can also click the join our program button now and get plugged into a community of men who have your back. So I want to dive deep into these 7 things because I want to spend the majority of our time together because these are really monumental. So you start listing these on page 29, and secret number 1, I'm just going to tell you what they are just so you don't have to worry about, flipping pages or remembering, which you probably already have it down.
I got it down. I bet secret number 1 is commitment. Am I right, Jim?
Yes, actually, it's consistency. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, commitment. And so you talk about, when I think of commitment, I think of the boring nature of good dads. Like they just are always there, always showing up.
Yeah.
And you said this, you said commitment has 2 parts, dedication and then commitment. Can you talk us through commitment?
Yeah. The 2 parts are, first of all, dedication. Number 1, what are you dedicated to? Are you dedicated to your job? Good. Have you written a fathering plan for your children? Hopefully. There are things that we're dedicated to. We're dedicated, those that are American citizens, to this country, upholding the values. My oldest son, he was in the military, wounded in Afghanistan. His commitment hit the dirt and the line. Now, the other part of commitment is constraint. What are you not going to do so you don't get lost in the other stuff that's out there? And this constraint is, making good choices. I'm going to say no to taking 3 strokes off my golf game because my kids are teens and I need to be at their wrestling or volleyball or whatever. I'm going to sacrifice. And so this commitment really has its core in that same word that was ushered to the God that became flesh. When he heard his father say, "This is my son, whom I'm well pleased in, listen to him." And I'm talking about the Mount of Transfiguration. And so what we have is commitment. And that's why, Jim, I'm so into what you're doing. Because, I can write stuff that is boring, is important, but yet it's got to have spiritual depth. And when we tap into that, that's the commitment that will survive and be our legacy, living that out.
It's interesting. I grew up with a dad who didn't say I love you until I was 32 years old. He handed me a knife. He said, "Here, son, I love you." And I thought, I'm never going to be that dad. I have a good dad, but he never did that. And then over the course of the years of raising my children, we said I love you so much it became boring. They started forcing my dad to say it, and now my dad and I say it until it's boring. So it does flip full circle. When I think about commitment being about dedication and constraint, I think of that component of the man who doesn't do certain things so he can be dedicated to other things. So in fact, in your book you wrote, constraint brings out a sense of obligation. It flips you back over to dedication, correct?
Absolutely. And let me just say, related to commitment, I salute right now the fathers who have special needs children. The work that you do are beyond what Jim and I know. God forbid that it brought that to your house, but your commitment, I see it and I'm thinking, they're the real heroes. In fact, if I get to heaven before you guys, I'm nominating you for the Congressional Fathering Medal of Honor, because guys who give it up when they have a special needs child, and right now, Jim, the data says 13% of children born are in that space. So we got to honor these guys. That's commitment at the highest level.
Well, and it goes back to your book on page 40. You said real fathering commitment is expressed in day-to-day activities. And that's what you're saying. Are you dedicated? Are you dedicated to doing something? Are you constraining? Are you practicing constraint? In other words, I'm not going to do these certain things. And really, fathering comes down to these day-to-day activities. What are some of these day-to-day activities that you think that we as dads should engage with our children?
Well, the first thing you're going to ask your child if they're in the school age, how did it go at school today? And as my wife says brilliantly, if they're kind of taken back because they're a teenager, you just add 2 words in the front. You say, I'm wondering, how did it go to school at school today? So it's your involvement in that part of their life, which is big. Now, if you're homeschooling them, that's a whole different thing. And you got to deal with that. And that's a different sort of fathering flavor, but it's an important one and a tasty one at that. Now, beyond that, your schedule should be looked at and analyzed. You should look at what's called the language of love, which children spell T-I-M-E. Don't tell me I'm given quality time. Well, baloney. You don't get quality time till you get quantity time. And so it's that putting those two. And remember, having reared children, and they're all gone now. And I don't know where yours are, Jim, but all I can just say, blink, and it's gone. It happens so fast. So these times are sacred that you have. So your time, your schedule, the commitments to activities and so forth, those are key things that really measure your commitment.
Yeah, and that's right. Measure your commitment. Commitment is not some philosophical thing out here. It is a measurable, it is a metric that is measured on the day-to-day things that we do with our children. I really appreciate that last comment. Well, let's move on to secret number 2, knowing your child. So when you say knowing your child, what does that actually mean?
Well, the knowledge of your child and their world, your awareness of what's going on in their life is critical. It's that knowledge that will lead you to understand issues or things they're dealing with that they may not talk about. So knowing your child, first of all, I'd love to interview the Ramos children. I'd tell you everything about Jim if you give me 30 minutes with them. I would say, what do you love about your dad? What do you see that, your dad is different than you, because you need that contrast. Knowing your children means knowing their personality, their giftedness, their vocational aptitudes, how they're doing in school. But it doesn't stop there. And I'm not suggesting that we institute the FBI, the Fathering Bureau of Investigation, but I'm telling you, we got to check everything that's going on. Who are their friends? How are they spending their money? What are they doing with their float or free time? How are they excelling or being challenged in an area, and even knowing their fears? So this knowledge of your children leads you to know those people, the teachers, the coaches, how their mother, and let's just talk here for a moment. Divorce or separation is increasingly growing. You've got to have a winsome attitude such that you can know how your son or daughter is dealing in this situation and that. And I don't care what happened. Your knowledge and awareness will build that heartfelt connection to them if it's pursued with a calmness and care that they know my dad just wants to know. Not control, he just wants to know.
I appreciate that last statement, not control, because we're not talking, guys, listen, we're not talking about being a bulldozer dad who's knocking down all your kids' problem. We're not talking about a helicopter who's hovering. We're talking about page 58 of Ken's book, where Ken writes, he studies them and their world like a gardener studies a mulched garden. That's what we're talking about. We're studying them. Now, in your book, you talk about kind of a way, there are kind of 2 ways to really study this and get to know our children. One is general, one is specific. Can you unpack that for us?
We know developmentally kids go through stuff. We know the internet, the iPhone, any media device. We know those things are coming. We know what's being fed in those areas. So we need to have general guidelines and boundaries that we establish. If we know our children, if we want them to excel in a way that perhaps we didn't. But then the specific things is some of you are nurturing leaders that are going to go do things that you as a dad never knew. And that's where you get into that nuance. What do we know about how they are particularly gifted in this area or that area, whether it's athletically, musically, or so forth? And so those are things that you have to pick up the specifics so that you as a dad can make things happen, because that's what dads do. They make things happen. So we need the general and the specific in order to really know our children the way that they need to be known and respected, because this is dignity that you as a dad are breathing into their life.
So the general, knowing the general about our children, does that go back to rigorous training that we as men need to plug in?
Yeah, it does. Because the general stuff, you were a kid once. You knew the things that you had to go through. You knew the peer pressure. You know, the negotiating with the opposite sex. You knew when you failed, how you handle it. You knew when you lied or maybe stole or did something that wasn't appropriate. Those things they're going to have to deal with. But the specifics is following them, not expecting them to just not have a connection with you as a dad, as someone who's been there. And that is how the specifics get played out and applied.
Man, this is such, guys, you are so blessed to be raising your kids right now, getting this information. I wish I had this stuff. This is good stuff. I could have had it. The book was out, but I never knew about the book. So that's on me until recently. So the secret number 3, and this is, to me, in my brain, I've had to mentally sift through or cut away, because number 3 to me and number 1 work very closely together. The first secret, of course, is commitment. The third secret is consistency. And you define consistency as you define consistency as the regularity, and I love this word, predictability. That is so good. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's real simple. Okay, you're Spain, and on the coast of Spain, you're going to take a trip across the Atlantic. There's a well-known reference point. It's called the Rock of Gibraltar. Okay, the Rock of Gibraltar has been there for generations, and it will continue to be there unless there's some explosion or try to move it, which is not likely. You are sending out explorers, and Dad, you're the Rock of Gibraltar. You're the consistency and the predictability by which they can explore their world and then come back home. You are allowing them a reference point of calmness, of discipline and guidance, of things that they know are important to their well-being, because the world is jacked up. The consistency, you don't even know one day whether you can have the same value on your home or what cash is worth than the next. Think of how all the crypto just melted down just like that. Dads who are consistent are those reference points. So the way you guide, shape, discipline your children is a sub-part of consistency. One of the things I did that was so fun, Jim, I'd love to do it with your kids. I get them in a room. I got my kids. Okay, I will pay you guys $2 if you will do an imitation of me. Oh my gosh. They like know my gestures. They know how I look. They know how I scratch my head. It was so convicting. But that's the sort of things that really give a sense of rootedness. So, what do your children know about that consistent behavior or that consistent life or the habits? Do you get up and do you read your Bible? Do you get up and say a blessing over them? Do you go to church and not crucify the message that has just been spoken? Are you critical of others? Kids are looking for those consistent reference points because there's security and safety in that.
I'm laughing because if you only knew my family, I'm going to ask them to imitate me. They're going to go crazy doing that. They're going to love, because we love to banter and joke back and forth. They are going to love that. I love what you wrote on page 80 in your book. You said it is crucial that as parents, we are consistent people, regular and predictable in their person and their actions. Children need to know what to expect, where they can find you. And this applies to your moods, behaviors, and schedule. Now that, when I read that, a sense of conviction came over me, because when I go back and reflect on my fathering, because I've identified a couple areas I wish I would have improved on. And the first one you talk about on page 85, and I'm just calling it stability. And for me, it was the emotional stability. Let me read what you wrote. You said, when a child of a consistent father interacts with his dad, the child, 1, knows what to expect. 2, there are few surprises. 3, no scares. An effective father is 4, consistent in his person. And 5, his actions. A consistent father governs his moods. Inconsistent fathers are emotionally erratic. And I look back on my fathering, and I try to be real with these guys listening. Because of exhaustion, I oftentimes was emotionally erratic. I think that my children would identify that as a potential flaw in my consistency. Is there anything else you'd like to add to stability?
Well, I just want to provide some counsel to the leader of Men in the Arena. When you screw up, say, I was wrong, and apologize. Yep. Okay, so you blow up and you're angry and you get ticked off at this and that. And then when you come back and you consistently apologize, what the Ramos kids are getting is a heritage of humility.
Yep.
Now, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze Jim. God's at a better place than I.
Yep.
But when you fail in consistency, own up to it and say, hey, I tried my best. This is what I've learned. I've learned since. I'm so sorry. But just count on this. When you have kids and you become a dad someday or a mom, I'm going to be the best grandparent possibly, because I wasn't the perfect dad, but I know you're going to be a better mom or a better dad.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I learned a phrase years ago that has served me well. Fix it. So I have found that fixing it. So I will tell you a funny story. I interviewed all of my children and my wife. I said, give me one thing that, when you think of me, what's my greatest strength? Which I was, like, here are the nails and the hammer. You know what I mean? My youngest son said sacrificing myself for family. My wife said my integrity. My middle son said determination and bench press. My oldest son said work ethic. Then my daughters-in-law said protecting the family and dedicated to the problem at hand. So I thought that was interesting, but I am going to ask them to imitate me, and I'll send you the video, Ken. It will be. I'll post it on social media.
You need to put a microphone in front of them. You're on Men in the Arena. Imitate me in 30 seconds, and the best imitation gets $50.
My youngest son, Colton, I can already see it. Pray about it. Pray about it. Pray about it. that's his imitation. So not only is a consistent dad stable emotionally and in his person, his character, but you said he practices what he preaches. And I just read 2 days ago in Ecclesiastes 5:7, New Living Translation, where Solomon simply wrote, talk is cheap. So I thought that was interesting. So talk to us about the importance and value of doing what we say and saying what we do.
Well, 2 things. And this comes to mind as we're talking. I've had countless stories after a divorce has occurred, a son or a daughter waiting for their dad to come pick them up, and he doesn't come. Now he's dealing with his own emotional stuff. Maybe his wife left him for another guy. I don't know. Things are really messed up. But then he fails to be consistent. And so what happens there is this, who can I count on? My dad doesn't show up. My dad doesn't follow through. So what is key, and the line that I think you're taking is, integrity in the end is what will distinguish you when it relates to consistency in your fathering, your family life, your marriage, and in your faith. Now, it is hard to be consistent, doing the same thing over and over. Let's just talk about what happens when you take communion. Do you really stop and think, somebody just died for me? His name's Jesus. This is his sacrifice. This represents his blood that cleanses me, and his body, which is going to be a part of my resurrection as I come. And consistency is not just going through the motions, but it's doing it with a sense of depth and humility. And the fact that we can take assurance in God is the same, our Father is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is endowing us with not a perfect, but a plan to be consistent if we're hooked up to him.
I just love this concept, Ken, of consistency. I just love this concept. We live in a world where if men just would step up consistency, that'll solve a lot of our issues. I want to move on to secret number 4. And secret number 4 would be kind of an obvious one, I think, for a lot of guys, but I do appreciate you take a little bit different twist on it. And it is protecting and providing. And you wrote, our culture for the past few decades has perhaps overemphasized the role of father as financial provider, but the effective father says, well, financial provision is not my only role. It is a role and one I consider important. So when you think of provider, what do you think of besides the financial component?
Provider is making sure the basic needs are met. You don't have to worry about the bells and whistles. Forget the Disney World and all the elaborate stuff. In the 1930s, when we were hit by a major depression, a guy named Glenn Elder did a magisterial study of families of the Depression. And this is what he noted, Jim, looking in the San Francisco, Oakland Bay area. Those families that were particularly hard hit, when fathers were there and shared the challenge together with their family, that we're going to have to hunker down. I don't know how we're going to make it. I may have to go work here and there and just do it. When those families have the acknowledgement of a dad that's saying, my provision is based on something bigger. I'm going to do the best I can. And you compare those to families that were flush, that didn't have, the problems and challenges. They were in a secure financial setting and place. Those children of what you would say the need base ended up 20 and 30 years later to be more well adjusted than the ones who had it all. So, Dad, in your provision, the simple fact that you work by the sweat of your brow, let it be known that you're doing the best with what you can, teaching budgeting principles and so forth, again, is one of the historic things. The thing that we've got to avoid, Jim, is think the more provision we have, the better fathers we're going to be. Because you know what happens? We'll start buying our fathering. We'll buy this camp, we'll buy this particular car, we'll buy that. Not that buying things is bad, but you can't put your security there because it's all going to turn to dust anyway. But it's that commitment in the daily way. That's the provisional way. And here's a simple thing. A difference maker between families that have what I call solidarity, they eat together. That doesn't mean, it's just so simple. You show up and eat as often as you can while your children are there in the same room. And you talk about the things that happened that day, and you get into the interaction. And then you say, either at the beginning or end, may God give us his wisdom, because this dad knows he doesn't have all the truth, but seeks my Father, my Heavenly Father's wisdom for all of us. So that's the sort of provision that is more than just the stuff.
Yeah, I really believe that our family breakfast for 20 years in the morning, 5 days a week, and what happened in our family from 5 o'clock at night till 8 o'clock at night, those two windows, a 20-minute window and a 3-hour window, were game changers for us, because we grew up, and our kids were in a full-time pastor's house, and the money was not, they were going to get rich doing it. So we had to find a way. Now, talk about when it comes to protection and provision, you spend a significant amount of time on crisis. So talk to us about why that is so important when we think about protection and provision.
Okay. Well, maybe you've seen the bumper sticker on the back of Jim's car or truck. It says stuff happens, or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. I knew you were going there.
Okay. So this is the deal. Crises occur, whether it's a crisis in your teenage daughter's life of not being accepted in a peer group or having a broken relationship or this or that. Crises occur. Dads who are protective foresee potential crises and have action plans laid out. It's important in a basic way just to know what happens if you're living on the coast of a island, if a tsunami alarm goes on. Now, you may say, well, that's the authorities' responsibility. Baloney. The authorities sometimes fail in their responsibilities, as we have seen. What we need to do is make sure what happens when we have a crisis, and how do we deal with that? And this protective factor, I think, is so important, because not only are we more vulnerable, but I mean, the whole world's weaponized. Things can happen in an instant. Just being wise and teaching them to have eyes that are wise. And there's protective factors that I list there in chapter 4.
Yeah, you had adopt a healthy attitude towards crisis, identify role models from whom you learn and deal with crisis, regain your confidence after a crisis by enjoying the support of other fathers, understand your own foundation in times of crisis, and talk to your children, and then maintain consistent discussion with your wife. So for me, the bottom line is this: we need to get ahead of crisis. And the way I do it is, I can tell you I'm a prepper and all that, which I am, but the way I do it is I pray every day protection over my kids, and the mindset of, and my wife, of course, and the mindset of praying that prayer over my family is that I know my daughter-in-law is a type 1 diabetic. So I pray over that. I know another one has stomach issues, so I pray over that. I know so you get ahead of it. So this is so good, Ken. I appreciate the protecting and provision. Let's move down to secret number 5. Now, you talked about my bumper sticker. It actually says, I do have a bumper sticker, and it actually says, wife is greater than kids. It's about this big, and it literally says that. And when you drive a lifted Toyota Tundra with that bumper sticker, people take notice, because that shouldn't be on the back of that truck. And so let's talk about secret number 5. Tell us what it is and why you struggled to understand this secret. Of all the secrets, you say that you struggled with this one.
Well, I struggled to see that this wasn't just a father-guided, a dad-guided thing. It was the dad recognizing this is the team. And, with, as I say, union with a woman, children are created. And hopefully that's a wife. But it's communion with that same woman that builds a household and a healthy family. Now, it's short-sighted, even though you may be a single custodial dad, not to respect and see the value that a mother of your child brought into your life. And to the extent that you can honor and respect and love her if you're living with her, that adds another layer of supernatural security to your child and their well-being. And that becomes a model, Jim, as well. Boys learn how to treat women by the way they observe their father treating their mother, and vice versa. Girls learn how to be treated by observing how my dad treated my mom. And so the need for us to model and make that one of the highest priorities within your fathering portfolio is key. Because your mother, as the Puritans said long ago, is your eye to see with, your ear to hear with, and your hand to touch your children with when you're not around. And they will see things, hear things, and experience things that will only empower you to be a spot on dad. And that's why the conversation and the connection, I regularly spend time with all of my children's mom, learning and listening to what's going on from her perspective, because she sees things that I don't. And that, I think, is one of those things that differentiated those effective fathers. So, again, let me just back up. I asked 10,000 men a series of a couple hundred questions. I asked a smaller group of effective fathers who are identified by their peers and leaders. These guys are stellar. I talked to their kids. And when I analyzed the two, these 7 traits surfaced. And one of the traits, it's not that the regular fathers didn't, love their wives, but they did it, the effective fathers, to a significant greater degree.
Well, it's really interesting. So I just finished reading a book by Peter Scazzaro called The Emotionally Healthy Leader. And the premise of his book really is spiritual leadership flows out of your marriage. Like, he really emphasizes the marriage, and I think that's a massive component. We have to realize that our marriage takes the highest priority because everything flows out of that. You said, and I love this, what you wrote here on page 138, a strong marriage breeds security. And then you continued, you said you love, guys, if you haven't got this, secret 5 is loving your wife. Loving your children's mother. Do you love your kids? Well, one of the best things you can do to love them is to love your mother. You write on page 134. The main benefit to your children of a good marital interaction between you and your wife is an atmosphere of security. Man, think about the stability of that. There's so much power in that in a world that is so fragmented and fractured.
Yeah, you see marriage under fire in a big way. And your gender contribution physiologically produce the gender of your child, be they son or daughter. So the connection that you have with the mother is so important. It not only gives safety, but security in who they are as a young man, a young woman. And that, I believe, is ongoing, because guess what? The children will grow up and leave. And if you haven't cultivated the marital bond, you don't want to see in your later years all of a sudden a split. Right now, they're calling it the gray divorce, where people are just looking the other way. And for no particular violation, they're just walking away. And what are the children to do, Jim? They're just saying, what? So cultivating that marital satisfaction and the delight that comes by having that wife that God has given you, the mother of your children. And it's going to get deep, for richer, for poorer. That means for success or bankruptcy, in sickness and in health. You're vibrant, you run together, and one of you may die, as I've experienced, in a way that you didn't expect. And so that's where marriage becomes a hallmark to your fathering, a remembrance.
Yeah, I've been married 31 years, and I cannot tell you how many of my peers are really struggling in their marriages and divorcing. And it comes back to not making the marriage the center of that. Jesus is the center, and the marriage is that inner ring. And the kids are not more important than the marriage. The marriage is more important. And one of the things I push back on all the time, Ken, I know you do too, is I'm pushed back very hard on this concept of this is my partner, even though it's a spouse. No, that's not your partner. Your partner is not a business partner. I think it's our culture's way of saying I can be a man-on-man partner, woman-on-woman partner, furry on man partner. And what I'm saying is no, none of that is true. What is true is man, woman, husband, wife, not your partner. This is not a contract. This is a covenant. Now, you said there's an added benefit, though. So there's an added benefit in your book. You talk about, hey, guys, listen, because we as guys, we want to know, hey, give us a solution, help us to solve our problems. We're fixers. You said, guys, there's another reason why wives are critical in understanding how you can be a better father. And you threw a couple kind of low-hanging fruit, and one of them is your wife will give you additional data about your children.
Absolutely.
And then I'm just going to list these off so the guys have, and you can address them. Number 2, your wife will give you a different perspective of your children. And number 3, your wife, and they do this very well, will give you tips on how to improve your parenting skills. Do you want to encapsulate that?
Yeah, and that is why I think this connection just makes you a better father. So take her and give her the rest and the support that she needs so that she can thrive in her mothering, because thriving mothers produce thriving fathers, and thriving fathers produce thriving mothers. And you get to the marriage core, you're so right, Jim, as we careen down to the end of time, whatever that is, what do we read about? A big celebration that's a marriage supper. It's called the marriage supper of the Lamb. And if you go to the book of Revelation, you don't hear about this is a fathering camping trip or a daughter, take her out. No, this is the marriage. So marriage is key. In a Catholic mindset, this is what's so good. Marriage is considered a vocation. What? A vocation. When I was in Poland teaching on fathering, I absorbed in Poland, even the cows are Catholic. I mean, this is a Catholic place, but they said marriage is a vocation. That's like a job. Oh my gosh, a calling, a vocation. And when you make that a vocational choice of highest priority, everything else, your fathering and family well-being, all those things fall into place.
Guys, your wife is in the stress bubble. She needs you to give her respite. When you get home from work, she needs you to take charge and give her rest. Make sure your women are rested and fresh and able to be their best version in the stress bubble as well. So let's move on to Secret 6. Secret 6 is, and I know the men are going to cringe when they hear it because I know how us guys are. Yep, put on those elephant ears, active listening. And you say this, I love what you said. I'm just going to read one short phrase on page 157. A home can be a noisy place. I'll let you address that.
Well, the fact that you have kids in the home, it's not going to be quiet anymore. And if you have more than one kid, it's going to get noisier and noisier. That's why you need to turn off the interfering noise, the television, the app, anything that is distracting you, because the noise drowns out what's most important. Now, we learn too that active listening is a posture. It isn't like, hey, I got you covered, but, oh yeah, let me, like this, or you all end up at the table and you all got your devices and you're checking in like that. No, the eye and the attentiveness is called accurate, active empathy. That's what happens when you look at people eye to eye. I tell a story about being in a nursing home taking care of an elderly lady. I was her actual conservator till she died at 103. I met her at church. She didn't. Her husband had died earlier, estranged from her kids. And so here I am, Jim, and I learned what active listening was. Because when you get this age, okay, you guys, Ramos may be here, but don't tell him. You get down to 10 big stories, okay, the big 10. And so you tell them over and over. And so I had heard all of her stories until one day I heard this one story over and over. And, you kind of get bored. So you look over here and then I looked at her and I listened like I'm listening and looking at you now, Jim. And she told me details about her life story I had never heard. that wouldn't have happened if I wouldn't have been an active, engaged listener. That's the way our kids are. They need that activity in order to bring them to life.
So based on all that, Ken, you talk about several fathering activities, you call them, about to help us engage in active listening. You talk about showing affection, knowing your child, and motivation. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah. Okay. This listening, this gift of listening, it's why God inhabits the praises of his people. He listens to them. It brings him joy. He inhabits them. Your children, when they are listened to, will open up the depth of their heart in ways they don't get when they're listening and taking notes at school, when they're listening to other directives at work, when they go and do this. When there is a father who is actively engaged in listening to their child, it brings both their emotional, their cognitive, and their empathetic system to the forefront. And, engaged fathers who are active listeners, Jim, have children who have higher measures of empathy. And people have said, well, I thought that's what moms did. No. They took and separated two groups and a controlled group. When fathers demonstrated empathy and listening, those children surfaced. It was expected that mothers do that, but when fathers did it, it added an additional factor that made them more empathetic in the way they live. So it's a preparation for this world, to be a listener to those children God's given you stewardship over.
Well, it goes back to what a mantra I say all the time: when a man gets it, everyone wins. So true. I look at my three sons. I've got one who just wants to have an active dialogue back and forth. I have one that wants to have a calm planning. He's always a planner, planning discussion. And one of my sons will not answer any questions I ask him. Unless I sit there quietly with him in relationship, and then he'll talk and talk and talk. So he responds to the space of active listening, right? And so that is because he's used to a dad who's a pastor, who's, pontificating. And so I've had to unlearn some behaviors. So let's talk about this pontificating pastor. So secret number 7 is spiritually equipping. Now, I think a mutual friend of ours, Brian Doyle, has shared with me that he never tells men what he did as a father to spiritually equip his kids, because he's a professional Christian like I am, and he said that we could overwhelm men. So what's the danger? We talk about spiritually equipping. What's the danger of our men listening, relying solely on the reports of their pastors, spiritual leaders, and guys that wrote books? What's the danger there that could possibly paralyze them from stepping into this role in a more powerful situation?
Well, I don't see it as a danger like Brian or you, Jim, giving guidance. I think it's one beggar or one father trying to find his way and telling the successes and failures. Now, I'm telling you, this is a place when I screwed up that was so interesting. So I thought the thing to do, because I didn't grow up in a Christian home, okay? So when I came to Christ, I was like, whoa, what's up with this? And then I got married, have children. And so I was kind of over the top. I wanted to make sure the things that set me free from the addictive behavior, drugs, and the stuff that I was living in was really a part of my kids' lives. So I'm reading on a Sunday afternoon. I said, hey, I want to read to you out of the Bible. Okay, so Sunday afternoon, the kids. So I tried to be really animated, and so I'm just going on and like this. And so I'm thinking that, you guys better listen to me, because this is really important. This is the holy word of God, da, 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 da. So I'm reading in Acts chapter 9, where Paul is on his way to Damascus. All of a sudden, this light came down, knocked the boy off, the donkey or whatever he was riding. And lo and behold, he became blind. And I looked at everybody. Okay, what happened right there? Okay, yeah, it got knocked down. And isn't that interesting? And I started to apply. And then my daughter, who was like 8 years old at the time, said to me, man, Dad, that was really cool how God used a laser. And I'm looking at it, as a literalist. I'm reading, well, where it says the light. And she just straight back looked at me and said, Dad, there were a lot of people traveling. Paul was the only one that was blinded. And I'm like thinking, oh my gosh. So sometimes you literalizing things or trying to get your truth through can be trumped by the insight of your children. So this is the thing. Our children will help guide us spiritually. Now, I'm not saying they're the ones that are the theological, leaders of your household. I'm not saying that. When it comes to the spiritual life, no doubt Jesus loved the children because he was weary of dealing with all the stuff the adults was laying on him all the time. And so, I learned then that this one particular daughter I had, she had a prophetic, insightful gift. Oh my goodness, which is still in play and active today in her family and even in our relationship. Other children were different. They were quiet, and I couldn't pressure them to do behavior-wise what I thought they should do. They had to experience a little of going out of the boundaries, and then I'm forced with saying, okay, gotta extend some grace here. And I'm just like, what? How could they do this? Now, it wasn't anything life-changing, but it's just those things that you go through in your spiritual formation and adolescent behavior that just kind of, is discombobulating.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement. You wrote in your book, you warn guys not to be paralyzed by a sense of inadequacy caused by comparison to others. And I think it's really important for these guys to identify the next step for them and not to compare themselves to somebody who could set a bar so high they can never cross it. So one of the things I do, Ken, is I'm constantly pushing on our guys, right? We've got about 250,000 guys that follow us every week. And a vast majority of those guys, more and more we're seeing guys that are not attending a local church. Right. So to me, that is problematic in the context of fathering. And you talk about practical tips listed when you're spiritually equipping your kids. And a lot of these have to do with being involved in a local, people don't like to hear the word church, so I say a local community of believers or a local fellowship of believers. Why is a father being committed to and leading his family into this local fellowship or community of believers? Why is this so important to spiritually equipping our kids?
Oh, it's vital because there are certain things you can't do. For instance, in a healthy situation, you should have grandparents, aunts and uncles, and so forth. But we're geographically disconnected. So where do they go to get that extended family? I know of no other place. You don't get it on the baseball team, the volleyball team, the dance lessons, the music lessons. You don't get multi-generational expression except in a place like a local church. So it's a no-brainer that you should be an active participant. And there are blessings. If it's a local church that has activities that benefit the whole family or parts of the family, that's good. Was a time when I was raising kids, we were going to 3 different churches. They had friends going to this church because the action was there. I said, do it, go, and vice versa. And then, sure, we gather at special times, but you have to, I think, be very open-ended. The thing that's so critical as you as a dad is just to cultivate your own faith, and out of the overflow of that, allow that to extend to your children.
I like that, the overflow. For me, I think when I talk to guys that aren't involved in a local church, I think of this. Okay, are your kids seeing you give to kingdom-oriented causes? Are they watching the checks pass? In a church, they do. Are they watching you raise your hands in worship? In a church, they are. Are they watching you put on the servant's towel and serve? There are certain things. Are they watching you flip through the pages of your Bible as the preacher preaches and taking notes in the provided notes in the church bulletin? These are things that guys don't understand who have rejected the local church. And I will never stop pushing, because I think the local church is a critical component for us as dads to get support within the stress bubble, to have an intergenerational context of people ministering to our children, having different ethnicities, different demographics. I mean, the church is the place where we all go to worship God. I think it's so good. Well, hey, Kent, man, we are out of time, but I want to go back through here, and I just love this episode. You talk about your 7 secrets: commitment, knowing your child, consistency. And now I do have a question, though, because in your book, now listen, I was in Seattle airport coming back from a speaking event in California, and I read this, that there's an 8th secret. And I was like, what is the 8th secret? So I know the book is the 7 secrets, but can you just help a weary traveler here?
Okay.
What is the 8th secret?
Okay. This is from a statistician, a researcher who's crunched numbers on tens of thousands of dads, literally, Jim. Sponsored random samples, written both scientifically and popularly. And it's this: I don't freaking know. When you get your own fathering, for the Ramos family, it may be a fishing boat on the back of the truck full of gas, and it's, let's go do this. It may be something unique. The 8th secret is like the 8th wonder of the world. You know, we've all identified the historic Hanging Babylon, Hanging Gardens in Babylon, Egyptian pyramids, et cetera, et cetera. The 8th secret, you know it, guys, because when you became a dad, the fact that you held that child, or at the adoption, you said, I am taking legal responsibility for this child, or even in a foster situation. That is the 8th secret of the world. And God, stuff that this researcher is going to follow and listen to, because that's God's handiwork in your life.
That's so powerful, man. I appreciate it. Commitment, knowing your child, consistency, protecting and providing, loving their mother, active listening, spiritual equipping. And for number 8, can I just use the word, it's a mystery?
You got it.
Mystery of life or something like that. So, Matt, Ken, thanks so much. This has been, we went a little bit over today, guys. This has been outstanding. You are going to use this as a great foundation for you to be not good dads, but great dads. So, Ken, thanks so much for coming on the show. Sure appreciate it, man.
And just let me say, for Men in the Arena, you go to fathers.com. It's simple. At the top, you got a free 7 secrets profile that you can take, get feedback that is objective, and also have your wife and older child or a good buddy take on you, because us being the best dads we can be is the difference maker and why our life on earth is so important. Keep up the good work.
I appreciate that, guys. Go on to Ken's website, take care of that, and become your best version of a dad.
Thanks, Jim.
That was outstanding, Ken. And guys, make sure you head on over. If you aren't already following the Men in the Arena podcast, make sure you subscribe to our podcast app. That helps us go up the charts so we can impact more men for Jesus Christ. Until next time, feel the wet sand on the arena floor. Hear the deafening roar of the crowd. Taste the sweetness of victory. Smell the stench of battle. Get in the game. Get dirty. Grind it out. And be a man.